What if I told you that some of the books people read for comfort and escapism may also be quietly shaping their expectations about love, intimacy, and relationships? What if the perfect fictional boyfriend that social media keeps glorifying, obsessive, controlling, emotionally intense man, is not romantic at all, but a character built on behaviors we'd normally recognize as deeply unhealthy in real life? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into a fascinating psychological and cultural phenomenon, the modern romance book boom. Across BookTok and BookTube, millions of readers are consuming highly emotional, often hyper-intense romance stories, stories filled with obsession, emotional volatility, and relationships that blur the line between passion and dysfunction. Of course, fiction is fiction, but when certain patterns are repeated often enough, we have to ask a deeper question. How do these stories shape the way we think, feel, and love? Today, we'll explore three things: the powerful marketing machine behind modern romance culture, the philosophical warning hidden inside Madame Bovary, and the surprising psychology behind how repeated fictional narratives can influence the human mind. The business of hype, book talk, booktube, and romance marketing. Let's begin with the business. If you spend any time on BookTok or BookTube, you have probably noticed something curious. The same handful of romance books seem to appear everywhere. Different creators, different countries, same emotional reactions, same glowing praise, same urgency. You need to read this. Sometimes that enthusiasm is completely genuine, but sometimes it may also be part of something larger, a carefully coordinated marketing ecosystem. Publishing houses and self published authors have learned that in the age of social media, emotional hype often sells faster than literary quality. Sponsored promotions, affiliate partnerships, and paid collaborations are now common parts of online book culture. And while there is nothing inherently wrong with promotion, the line between authentic recommendation and strategic marketing can sometimes become difficult for readers to see. So, how can you recognize exaggerated hype? Here are three subtle signs. First, red flag romanticization. When deeply troubling behaviors such as manipulation, stalking, or emotional control are framed primarily as protective, intense, or passionate, it's worth pausing. Romantic chemistry should not erase critical thinking. Second, emotional buzzwords without substance. Phrases like, you will melt, it destroyed me, the tension is insane. These reactions may be sincere, but sometimes they replace meaningful discussion of actual writing quality, characterization, or narrative depth. Third, the simultaneous hype wave. When many creators begin discussing the same unfamiliar title at the same time, it may reflect coordinated promotional momentum, not necessarily organic literary discovery. Again, this does not mean the book is bad. It simply means readers should remain aware that recommendation culture and marketing culture are often deeply intertwined. The Madame Bovary warning: when fiction distorts reality. This tension between fiction and reality is not new. In 1856, French author Gustave Flaubert published Madame Bovary, a novel that feels surprisingly relevant today. The story follows Emma Bovary, a woman whose mind has been shaped by romantic fantasies. She consumes idealized stories of passion, grandeur, and emotional intensity. As a result, ordinary life begins to feel unbearable. Her marriage feels dull, her husband feels inadequate, reality itself feels disappointing. Why? Because fiction has altered her expectations. This phenomenon later inspired a psychological concept sometimes called Bovarism, the tendency to become dissatisfied with real life because it cannot compete with imagined emotional ideals. And perhaps this is where modern romance culture becomes worth examining. When readers repeatedly absorb stories where love must always be dramatic, obsessive, and emotionally overwhelming, healthy affection can begin to feel ordinary. Steady love can feel boring, emotional safety can feel less exciting than emotional chaos, and slowly fiction can begin to reshape what feels desirable, not because readers are naive, but because human imagination is powerful. The psychology, how fiction can influence the brain. Now let's look at the science. Can fictional stories actually influence how we think and feel? Psychological research suggests yes, especially through repetition. First, dopamine and emotional conditioning. Our brains are highly responsive to emotional stimulation. Many modern romance narratives are built around intense emotional highs, fear, desire, conflict, relief, and dramatic reconciliation. These emotional spikes can activate reward pathways associated with dopamine. Over time, repeated exposure to highly intensified fictional relationships may shape emotional expectations, making calmer forms of connection feel less stimulating by comparison. This does not mean reading romance is inherently harmful, but it does mean that repeated emotional patterns can influence what our minds begin to crave. Second, desensitization to red flags. Some psychological studies suggest that repeated exposure to narratives that normalize unhealthy relational behaviors can subtly affect perception. When controlling behavior is consistently framed as devotion, when jealousy is framed as passion, when boundary violations are rewarded with emotional intimacy, the mind can begin to interpret warning signs differently, not consciously, quietly, gradually. This is how normalization works. We do not suddenly stop recognizing danger, we simply become more willing to reinterpret it. Control can start to feel like care, possession can start to feel like love, and emotional instability can start to feel like death. That is where fiction can become more than entertainment. It can become emotional training. Reading remains one of the most powerful things we can do for the human mind. It builds empathy, sharpens attention, expands imagination, but like every form of mental consumption, it shapes us. The question is not should people read romance? Of course they can. The better question is what kind of emotional world are these stories teaching us to desire? Fiction can comfort us, it can inspire us, but it can also quietly distort our expectations if we consume it without reflection. Perhaps Madame Bovary still has something to teach us that when fictional fantasies become more emotionally compelling than reality itself, dissatisfaction often follows. So, the next time a book that makes your heart race, ask yourself, is this expanding my emotional wisdom or simply training me to confuse intensity with intimacy? What are your thoughts on modern romance books? Have you noticed these patterns online? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoy deep dives into psychology, philosophy, and culture, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Until next time, stay curious. Also, don't forget to follow me on Instagram. Bye bye.